Spend all your money on these fucking fancy books. You surround yourselves with them. They're the wrong fucking books.
So, you guys know I like movies, but what you guys might not know is that I also like reading too. Mostly horror, thrillers, and some mysteries and whatnot. So I decided why not take my love for movies and my love for reading and combine them, and start a series where I take a movie and look at their novelization counterparts, and see what's different, what's similar, and decide which is better. Now for those of you who don't know what a novelization is, it's pretty simple. It's just a movie taken and turned into a book, and it's typically based off the original screenplay of the film. It's kind of funny because it's like the opposite of what commonly happens, which is someone takes a book and makes it into a movie. Here it's basically the reverse. And why do they do this? Honestly, I'm not really sure, but they've always fascinated me. The first one I ever read was Cabin in the Woods, and then not long after I got the Man of Steel novelization. Now what makes them interesting is that sometimes it can give you more insight to the characters and mention things that aren't in the movie, because it has the power to explore their inner thoughts better and elaborate on events and characters and provide more backstory. But these novelizations are essentially just retelling the story based on the original screenplay, so it's really similar to the movie. Now I'm not too sure when they actually started writing these things, but they typically release not long after the movie comes out, so I assume that the writing process starts pretty early in the development of the movie, because it takes a lot of time to read the script, then write the novel, get it edited, and then get it sent off and approved to finally get published. So I imagine they start doing it once the movie starts filming, or as soon as the script is finalized. Although there are exceptions, like the novelization for the original Halloween. It came out a year after the movie did. I always found it interesting to watch a movie, then read the book version, and spot the difference. And I couldn't think of a better one to start with than 2016's Suicide Squad. It was published a few days after the movie hit theaters, and was written by Marv Wolfman. That name might sound familiar because he wrote a lot of Teen Titans runs from the 80s all the way to the 2010s, so he was pretty well known in the comic book sphere, but he also did the Arkham Knight novelization, so the guy is a pretty experienced writer. Now I found this to be a very interesting read. It has numerous differences, and in some ways, it's actually much better than the theatrical cut of the movie. But on the flip side, in many ways, it's just like the movie. Now, I think the best way to do this is just to go in chronological order and mention the events in the book that are different, as well as what's similar. So this might take a while. Also, I like to mention that I own this book physically, not digitally, so I really won't be able to show you much of the actual pages and what it says. So I'll just be telling you what the differences are. Alright, are you ready? Let's get started. Now I imagine you guys are familiar with the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad. If you aren't, I did a whole video about it, so go ahead and check that out. But basically, David Ayer has come out and mentioned how his movie was completely changed by Warner Brothers. It was recut, re-edited, reshot. I mention it because since this novelization is based off of David Ayer's original script, it actually starts exactly how David Ayer has described it before, with Dr. Moon discovering Enchantress. The first couple chapters are about her journey in South America, and discovering the witch's tomb. It's roughly 3 chapters, but it's only about 20 pages. This book has a lot of chapters, but they're usually very short. The longest I saw was about 10 pages, and the shortest chapter I saw was about 2. And I imagine it's like this because it bounces around for different perspectives a lot, especially in the first part of the book, which I should mention, this book is separated into 3 parts. Part 1 is basically character introductions and forming the Suicide Squad. Part 2 starts when they get to Midway City and ends right before Amanda Waller gets captured by Enchantress. And then finally, part 3 is the final battle, the climax, and the ending. So anyway, back to what I was saying. The first 3 chapters is about Dr. Moon discovering Enchantress and getting possessed. The next event that is different is what follows immediately after, and that's Johnny Frost breaking Joker out of Arkham Asylum. But this section also includes the scene where Harley Quinn gets shocked by Joker. Of course, we get some of the same lines of dialogue that are in the movie, but on top of that, there's actually even more lines and interaction between them, right before he shocks her. Although I think the description they give him is kind of funny. Ripped like a mixed martial arts fighter. Judging from how he looks in the movie, I wouldn't go that far.
Assalamu alaikum, my niggas. What's good?
Next we get Deadshot's introduction, which is the same as it is in the movie, where he kills the rapper Angelo. It plays out basically the same. Next we cut back to Harley and Joker in the club, and this is the scene with Monster T. It plays out very similar, except it does elaborate a little bit on how Joker sees Harley, as more of like a pet or plaything. It's not really romantic like it's shown in the movie, at least not from his perspective. And the scene actually ends with Joker pushing Monster T to kill himself, instead of having Joker do it for him. I like it more because it shows Joker having fun with the situation, and basically puts Monster T in a lose-lose situation. He either says Harley is hot and Joker kills him, or he says that she isn't and Joker kills him. So might as well kill himself to make it quick. But then the scene ends with Joker laughing, then actually getting upset. Then he snatches Harley by her arm and drags her to the car, again showing the toxicity of the relationship. Next we cut back to Deadshot getting captured by Batman, and it's pretty similar to the movie, but we actually get to meet his ex-wife as she's picking up Zoe and she leaves with her. And then Batman shows up and they have their fight. Although I want to point out something. After Zoe leaves, Deadshot says, "Thanks for waiting for my daughter to go," and Batman says, "This is nothing she should see." But then he follows it up with, "Besides, she'll have gray hair when you see her again." And then they fight. It just felt like a strange line for Batman to say. I like the first line, but not so much with the second one. But the scuffle ends with Deadshot getting captured. Now it cuts back to Joker and Harley. Yeah, this book bounces around a lot. And they're driving and arguing. Joker is upset because Monster T made him a lot of money, and he blames Harley for the reason why he's dead, as well as several other business associates. She says that he's the one who keeps killing them, and he says it's her fault because she keeps manufacturing situations in the first place. But then Batman shows up and things happen as you expect. There's a car chase, Joker jumps the car into the river, and Harley Quinn gets captured. Except before he dives into the river, he asks Harley if she can swim, and she says no. And so he says, "It sucks to be you," to, and he does it anyway. And then after Batman pulls her from the river and resuscitates her, Batman says, Joker took something important away from me, now it's my turn, and thus she gets locked up. So again, very similar to the movie, except with several added lines of dialogue. The next event is also in the movie, is when Harley talks to Griggs, and she gets shocked by the bars. This scene plays out basically the same. Then it cuts to Deadshot and Griggs having their altercation like in the movie, except they have a lot more back and forth, and instead of ending with Deadshot getting beaten up by the guards, he instead just loses his mattress. I also like to mention that Griggs in the book is a less goofy character than he is in the movie. He's way more of a prick, and really loves his position, and likes to abuse his power a little bit. Next is Rick Flagg meeting Dr. Moon, who got possessed by the witch at the beginning of the book. You can actually see a glimpse of this scene in the trailer, but it's not in the movie. It's the one where she's in the bathtub. Also in this chapter, Amanda Waller makes her first appearance, and befriends her, and cuts her a deal to help her out. Then it ends this part with Diablo in a dark cell, making a little dancing fire girl, clearly thinking about his wife. And then finally, after roughly 60 pages, and introducing all the main players, Amanda Waller finally has her dinner with the government guys, and is talking about Task Force X. And this plays out the same as the movie, even with several lines being identical. Only big difference is it doesn't have her showing files and explaining who everyone is. She only mentions Diablo and Enchantress. Now in the movie, it actually uses most of these previous scenes we just read for brief character introductions, but in the book it goes more so in chronological order. So we get introduced to the characters, we see how they got caught, and then we see Amanda Waller talking about Task Force X. Next we cut to Belle Rev where Harley Quinn is getting force-fed by a nurse and Griggs, while she's thinking about the Joker, and waiting for him to come save her from that place. We see a glimpse of this in the movie, but for a brief second, and it's interspliced in the scene where she gets shocked by the bars. Then we cut to Deadshot in his cell thinking about his daughter, and it's late at night and it's raining outside. And I believe we see a glimpse of this in the trailer, but it's not in the movie. And then we end the chapter by introducing Killer Croc, and it's the Fiend scene that's in the movie, and it plays out the same here, except Killer Croc is described as 6.5 feet tall and 350 pounds. Yeah, he ain't nearly that big in the movie. These next couple of chapters play out mostly the same. Waller pitches the team in a room full of government guys, Enchantress steals a book of top secret plans, they get the green light, Amanda, Flagg, and Dr. Moon arrive at Belle Rev, Deadshot does some shooting, Flagg meets Killer Croc, Joker's given information about Harley, and he actually starts to miss her because of the sex and unconditional love and obedience and loyalty she has to him. Again, giving us more insight on how Joker feels about Harley here. It's not as romantic as it is in the movie. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is the same, but now it's time for something different. We get a moment between Rick Flagg and Dr. Moon. It goes over her struggles with living with Enchantress, and Flagg is asking her a bunch of questions about it. They end up getting pretty friendly and ends with them kissing. Next we see Diablo Decline being part of the team, which is basically the same, but then immediately after, Flagg is comforting June in the medical bay of the prison, because she's a nervous wreck. And then Amanda Waller shows up, and her and Flagg start talking. And it's a scene that's actually in the movie, it just takes place in a different location. It's a scene where Flagg said he can build a better team, and where he also said that he can leave with a phone call. And then Waller lays down her phone on the table, and lets him know what happens to June if he leaves. Again, this is in the movie, it's just in a different location. And now we're back to a string of events that are in the movie. Joker pays Griggs' debt, makes him his bitch, Enchantress steals her brother's jar, and releases it to a guy in a subway station, whose name is Gerald Davis, by the way. Don't know why it's important, but they told us his name. Then Incubus takes over from there and starts destroying things. Only thing that's different about these events are that lines of dialogue are changed, and Enchantress actually talks more to Rick Flagg. There's actually a moment after releasing her brother that she goes back to Rick Flagg to mock him, and she actually starts to kiss him, but eventually June gains control again. And finally, at chapter 23 on page 121, Griggs and all the other guards start rounding up the squad, and it's basically the same as the movie. Again, just slightly different lines of dialogue, and events play out just a little differently, but it's mostly the same. Same with the next chapter, which is Joker raiding the lab and kidnapping the scientist guy. And then that concludes part 1 of the story, 136 pages. It spends most of the time setting up and introducing the main characters, as well as Task Force X. And towards the end of part 1, with the last 20 or 30 pages, it sets up the main threat and conflict. And now we move on to part 2. Part 2 starts with Rick Flagg addressing the team, and having Slipknot and Boomer show up. And it basically plays out the same, except you get introduced to the main Navy SEALs and soldiers that will be helping Rick Flagg. They got names, but I don't really care, honestly. And we get a long interaction between Flagg and Boomerang. Now, I'm not gonna lie, after a few chapters, I just started to skim through part 2, because a lot of it is the same. The events play out in the same order, and just like before, even though a lot of the lines of dialogue are different, with some of it being the same, the event still happens basically the same way. What's really different is that there are several more character interactions between the squad, as well as more interactions between Flagg and the soldiers, and way more interactions between Rick Flagg and Deadshot. Now, some of this stuff is actually in the extended cut of the movie, and some of this stuff is in the leaked script pages from a few months ago, like Deadshot talking to Killer Croc, Harley pestering the squad, stuff like that. And here's some little fun facts that I picked up on. The creatures that they fight are called EAs, Eyes of the Adversary. At least that's what Diablo calls them, and Harley was the first to realize that these things were actually people at one point. And I thought that it was energy drinks that Boomer was pulling from his jacket and drinking, but in the book it says that it's beer. Although there still are a few things that aren't in the movie. Diablo actually has a flashback about his wife as soon as they enter the city, and there's a really short scene with Joker and Frost on their way to Harley. But anyway, all the big events are still the same. They suit up, they go to the city, they get shot down, they work their way towards the building where Amanda Waller is, and they battle a few groups of enemies along the way. It's just there are a lot more character interactions between all that, and it gives us some more insight on the thought process of some of the characters, mainly Deadshot and Rick Flagg. And on top of the building where Harley gets saved by Joker, we actually get that leaked scene of him saying the shit I do for you.
The shit that I do for you. We're gonna talk.
Again, not as happy as it is in the movie. Oh, and we also get to see the Joker survive the helicopter crash, because he jumped out not long after Harley did, and just landed on a different rooftop. And then part 2 ends on page 291. I know I didn't go into as much detail as I did in the first part, and that's because, like I already said, it mostly plays out the same, with just more interactions, arguments, and banter between characters. And some of these things you can see in the extended cut of the movie. And in this section, there are only a handful of scenes that aren't in the movie at all. And now we can finally move on to part 3. And this section is going to wrap up faster than the last one. It plays out very close to the movie, but like in part 2, there are just more character interactions and different lines of dialogue, and that's about it. The climax and the conclusion are the same. Diablo sacrifices himself to kill Incubus, the squad defeats Enchantress, Dr. Moon comes back and Amanda Waller is saved, and you all get a little request at the end to help make their life in prison a little better. Deadshot sees his daughter, Killer Croc gets a better cell, but he doesn't ask for BET. And Harley is reading a book when Joker breaks in and they escape. What's actually more surprising is what's not in the book or the movie, but David Ayer himself has confirmed is in his cut of the film, like Joker being involved during the final battle with Enchantress, and he was going to take Harley away, but she refuses and stands up for herself. Then he gets frustrated and throws a grenade at her and her friends, and then he bounces. And on top of that, Diablo doesn't die in Ayer's cut of the movie. So those are things that aren't in the book or in the theatrical cut of the film, and are exclusive to just David Ayer's cut. So in the end, it was a pretty interesting read. The first part is the most intriguing section because it gives you much more information and backstory about the main characters, and structurally, it's different than the movie. Now, the movie has a lot of the events that are in the first part of this book, but they're much shorter and used mainly in flashbacks, as ways to quickly introduce the characters. So the first section I prefer over the movie because of how much more detailed it is. The movie glosses over several scenes and moments, or they just don't have them. So as far as the first part of the novelization, I do like it more than the movie. But as for parts 2 and 3, I'm a little indifferent because they play out mostly the same, and sure, there are a lot more character interactions, but the issue is the same issues that I have with the second half of the movie. I don't think it's the best, and that's when the pace really slows down, and it's not as interesting. And the final battle and climax just isn't that compelling or that good, really. And those events just aren't that different in the book, so I don't like it in the movie and I don't really like it here. And another reason why I started skimming about 2/3 the way through the book is because things were starting to get boring. It was already very similar to the movie, and just like the movie, it had parts where it's just kind of boring and not that interesting. I think the dialogue is decent enough, and the first part of the book is very interesting. And I liked a lot of the banter between characters, but the action sections aren't written to be as intense or awesome as they should be. Overall, I found it to be a pretty interesting read, and it's cool seeing what was changed from the screenplay to what was actually filmed, and what the author introduced and incorporated themselves. Now, is it better than the movie? In some aspects, yes. It definitely has much more fleshed out characters, and I definitely prefer Joker and Harley Quinn's relationship in the book versus the movie. But after the halfway point, it's basically the same thing. But I think it's going to do it for the video. Leave a comment and let me know if you enjoyed this type of content, and if you'd like to see more like it in the future, because I think it's really interesting to read these novelizations and see the differences. Some of the ones that I got are Man of Steel, The Dark Knight Rises, The Woman in Black, Angel of Death, and I recently got the Batman prequel novel. It actually ties into the film. That one I'm probably going to make a video on anyway. Let me know if you're interested in seeing more videos like this. They take a while to make because, you know, I gotta read them and that takes time. But yeah, that's gonna do it. Thanks for watching. Now, if you excuse me, I'm gonna return to reading my R.L. Stine novels.
Dribble these cheeks.
Come. I mean, I knew you would come, but you've come.
I have come.